Okay, welcome back to Firewall. As usual, I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. With me today is Jeff Miller. Jeff is the founder and CEO of some of you may know of Helping Hands Community. We're going to talk a lot about that. But you have this kind of amazing background that kind of spans, business, finance, tech, just all kinds of incredible stuff. And then, an educational background also that's even broader than that. So, how'd you do all this? Do you just have, like, a really short attention span? And, like, walk us through from, like, when you started all this till you ended up at running Help Your Hands and founding it.
Sure, sure. First, Bradley, thanks for having me on today. It's a pleasure to chat with you. And you're also someone who isn't afraid to paint outside traditional lines in your pursuit of having an impact in the world. So it's an honor to join your show. Um, I think the guiding principle for me has always been wanting to feel like I'm solving meaningful problems in the world that are gonna to have an imprint, and those problems could be micro, local, about individual communities, or they could be more macro focused. Climate change being an area that I've been spending the better part of the last decade focused on at the intersection of transportation and trying to make the way our cities move about more sustainable and less carbonated. So I guess the cliff notes was I started in nonprofit, working in microfinance in a number of different countries, and looked at who was running the organizations and realized most of them had cut their teeth in the private sector. So I figured it might be some good schooling and tool building for me to go spend a few cycles in the private sector. That's what found my way to Silicon Valley, where I joined a company that was focused on the electrification of our transportation system, a company called Better Place. This might seem self-evident at this point with Tesla's success, but at the time, Tesla hadn't even shipped their first Roadster. So there's very literally zero electric vehicles you could buy on the market, and we wanted to figure out how could we catalyze a more accelerated adoption of EV technology. I learned a lot about startups. Unfortunately, that startup wasn't successful. So you learn a lot of lessons in failure. And I observed some great things the company did and some less so, which I took with me as I started my own first venture, which was Wheels, a peer-to-peer car sharing platform that allowed individuals to provide their vehicle to others in the neighborhood or their local community as a way of sort of reducing the overall number of vehicles that our world needed to move about. I had a great first journey as a founder, learned a lot, made a bunch of mistakes, did a few things right, and we were able to sell the company after a few years. And after that, I was exploring what I wanted to do next. I thought I'd start another company, and then was chatting with Benchmark, who'd been involved with Wheels, and they introduced me to some of the folks at Uber, which was not a startup at the time, and I think it was 700 people, which seemed like an enormous company. But I was just enthralled by the potential that platform had for changing the way our cities work. So the last 6 years at Uber, leading the commercial side of their self-driving vehicle project. Left last August and was enjoying another sabbatical to explore when COVID hit. And, I looked about, I was struck by how many people were vulnerable to this disease and how little infrastructure there was to provide goods, services, delivery to those who needed to shelter in place, especially if those individuals were food insecure or also suffering from poverty related issues. And so it felt like we needed to build some technology to meet the need of the day. And here we are.
And so, you must have built this whole thing pretty quickly. What was it like to sort of create something brand new, for a pandemic, but also in a pandemic, right? It wasn't like you were able to have all the traditional methods that people use to create something.
Yeah. So to be honest, I don't think when we first started, we realized what it would become. I started by emailing a colleague of mine named Pedram Kayani from Uber, who ran all of Uber's hackathons. He introduced the art of the hackathon where he had previously honed those skills running Facebook's hackathons. So I always had an affinity for him. We didn't work closely on any projects, but I think we always caught up in the halls. And I'd been looking for an excuse to work with him. So I figured he was the perfect person to call, knowing how to build quickly and how to build at scale. So we, recruited some of our former Uber designers and engineers and some of his former colleagues from Facebook to try and build our first product, which was more of a consumer product, a two-sided marketplace for helpers and those who need help. And we launched it into the wild, and we posted about it. And then our friends heard and wanted to help, and their friends heard and wanted to help. And pretty soon we realized we needed to build a proper organization. And so, right now it's structured much like a Series B, Series C tech company. We're about 150 people, volunteer only, 100% remote, with all of the core business functions: legal, finance, business operations, customer support, user success, field operations, field marketing, digital marketing, um, product, eng, design, and we run it like a startup. The only difference is everybody's a volunteer. But everybody's bringing their professional A game with whatever cycles they have to give. Some are full time, some are part time, some are a couple hours a week.
The people on the side of the equation that need help, who do they tend to be? Is it individuals struggling businesses, nonprofits? Who are they usually?
So our mission is to serve those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19 from a health standpoint. So it's senior citizens, people with pre-existing medical conditions, people with diabetes, or recovering from cancer. What we found though is it's actually quite hard to build a digital product that directly reaches them. And I think it was 2-3 weeks after we launched, we got an inbound call from a healthcare organization called Wider Circle. I knew the founders well because we'd been classmates, and they were facing a really unique challenge. They had a client relationship with 150,000 seniors in California, but they'd never had to figure out how to bring sustenance to them. And they were really struggling with it. They saw the platform we were building and asked, do you have 1,000 volunteers in LA yet? And we'd turned the lights on about a week earlier, so no, we didn't have 1,000 volunteers to offer yet. Maybe we could achieve that in a couple of weeks, but it a light bulb went off, and I said, look, if we really want to be able to respond quickly, we need to tap the resources and capabilities of other organizations. So I reached back out to Uber, and we started working on an Uber Eats API integration,
Hmm.
such that when a need arose anywhere in the country, rather than having to drum up 1,000 volunteers, we could leverage technology and infrastructure that's already been built. And so what we're really doing is we're connecting organizations more so than individuals now. It's organizations that are serving recipients of Medi-Cal, recipients of Medicaid, and then we're connecting them to food providers like food banks that use our platform, or we're connecting them to last mile delivery solutions, either through our volunteers or through organizations like Uber.
How has it kind of evolved as the disease has, not disease, like the virus has kind of wound its way around the country, where it felt like, if I'm in New York, it felt really intense in March and April, and then kind of has gotten less intense since. Although I suspect we may be in for another round, and then other parts of the country obviously kind of have been the opposite. Um, how do you guys sort of how has it evolved over the last 4 months, and where does it go, and does it end when there's a vaccine, or where do you take this thing?
Yeah. Um, so I think, as you described at the outset, things were really bad in New York. They weren't as bad in California, but they were bad. But what was universal was that the collective conscious of society was focused on the challenge. People were sheltering in place, they were home, and it was what people thought about when they woke up and when they went to bed. The result was that there was a huge surge of volunteerism at the outset. Um, then shelter in place winds down, and people have to go about not a normal life, but something more approaching normal. They have to go back to their jobs. And for the average person, especially younger folks that are less vulnerable, it does feel like a return to normalcy. However, for those that are most vulnerable, that isn't the case. Like the concern is ever present, and it's more dangerous than ever. And what we've seen is the virus has come back and surged as people went back. Unsurprising, given the nature of the virus. And we're now at all-time cases are higher than they've ever been. And so those who are vulnerable are more vulnerable now than they've ever been. Yet for the average person, like it's less on the collective conscious. So the need for reliable services like what we're building are higher than they've ever been.
Yeah, and then so I mean, have attitudes around this surprised you, or the kind of what you expected in terms of people that not taking it seriously, then taking it seriously? I mean, there's been a lot of kind of stopping and starting in people's perspectives on how to handle this. What's been your reaction as you've been seeing that all along?
Um, I've been positively surprised and delighted by the outpouring of enthusiasm and support, and just the goodness of humanity brought to bear on an important problem. Like nobody in our organization has to be there. We're 100% volunteer, and people are working over and above their day jobs because they care about serving other people. That's the only currency in our company, the ability to serve. Um, and I'm blown away by the capability that our team has, by the passion, the hustle, the creativity that they bring, um, to something that has no paycheck attached to it. There's there's no IPO, there's no equity. All there is the opportunity to serve more. And so I've been really encouraged about the goodness of humanity through the pandemic.
Do you think you can keep people on the platform to do other types of volunteering once the pandemic is over, or do you need the kind of intensity of a pandemic to kind of get people to focus?
So my answer to that question is slightly different now than it would have been at the outset. So at the outset, we were trying to build more of a consumer platform, a two-sided consumer marketplace, like eBay. What we're building now is more of an enterprise marketplace,
Mhm.
uh, which the enterprises will persist, and the need is not going away. So we're working with a number of food banks, and we were speaking with Feeding America this week, which is an organization I know you know well, given all of the work you've done on
Yeah.
hunger issues.
Yeah, we love
Uh,
them. Yeah.
they started trying to solve last mile problems long before the pandemic. So there is a need to serve our citizens by bringing food to them. The 1% or the wealthy have appreciated the bounty of freedom that comes from being able to take out your phone, push a button, and get Uber Eats or DoorDash or Postmates. But that's expensive, and it's outside of the reach of much of America.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
you know, Prior to the pandemic, I think there was 37 million food insecure
Yeah.
citizens in the country, and right now it's estimated that it's ballooned to 57 million. That's 1 in 6 Americans that are food insecure. And like you, as I said, you've been working on this problem for a while. You've done amazing work on some of the school food programs, and some of the political work you've done to make sure there's more funding. But what hasn't been solved is technology hasn't been brought to bear on this problem in the same way that it has
Yep.
to other sectors of the society. So what we're building will have enduring value um, beyond the pandemic. The pandemic was the catalyst, and it's the convening function that brings together large health insurance providers like Optum Health, part of United, that brings together nonprofits like ourselves, that brings together organizations like Feeding America and Uber. And we can kind of stitch these together and build, hopefully, a more enduring solution that can serve people long beyond COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I see in my experience, both in government and kind of the nonprofit sector around food, where there are things that government can do because it has kind of scale and scope and all of that. Um, but a lot of sort of some of the smaller problems, are just very hard for either government or the nonprofit sector to solve, right? Like how do you, like Meals on Wheels is a great organization, but definitely hard to get get food to people who are homebound and things like that. And so it's easy to see how if you can involve kind of the people who are building companies and kind of all of their expertise, how much more you could do. Okay, this is a spot to introduce the new iPhone 14. I didn't realize they were up to 14 yet, but I guess they are. Sure, you just bought a new phone 8 months ago, but according to our records, it's scheduled to break in the next 6 weeks. And Sure, you paid for the warranty, but by the time you cover the deductible, it's really cheaper to just get the new phone anyway. And sure, you may not technically need the ability to take photos from outer space or turn your deformed left pinky toe into a cute emoji or to book travel or buy tickets or make reservations or any of the things you used to do from your phone that were actually useful. But we, meaning Apple, need the revenue. We've only got $207 billion sitting in the bank. So don't wait till your phone stops working completely. Just trust us that it'll happen in order to happen today. If you don't, you'll regret it. Okay, here's a special offer just for Firewall listeners. You can get HBO Max, Quibi, a 3-year subscription to Glamour, 4 coupons for the Tuesday afternoon sessions at Belmont, an economy minus ticket to Belgrade on Ryanair, and a $9 tune-up at Jiffy Lube for nothing. That's right, absolutely nothing. They want nothing from you whatsoever. They just want someone to use their product or service. So just take it, please. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I want to jump into you've done so many interesting things, on top of this. I want to just kind of get your sense of a few other things. So, um, the peer-to-peer car sharing concept, when you
Mhm.
guys came up with it, what was your thought around a kind of social norms that would need to change to make it popular, and then
Mhm.
kind of how much have those norms changed or not changed in that direction?
Yeah. So at the time we launched it, it was, I think Airbnb had been out for maybe a year, year and a half. So the notion of a sharing economy wasn't novel, but it was still like my car. Really, my car is such a personal thing. So we did a few things. One, we built an aftermarket hardware device that we could install in cars that made it more easy for people to rent their car out, so that they weren't like tied to the physical car to do a key handoff. And then we launched into more closed communities. So we launched on college and university campuses where there was a degree of built-in trust because you're part of the same affinity group. You're a Stanford student, therefore it's more likely that I can trust this other student because like we have a shared identity. Or within other like closed communities. That was good to build trust, but it wasn't great for building a business. You need to get a liquid marketplace. You need a much larger population to drive liquidity and ultimately to build a business. So um, a few things happened. One, all of the companies in the space started trying to replicate Zipcar for a peer-to-peer model.
Yeah.
Turns out that's really hard. The short hourly rentals is just a really hard business to build. I mean, even Zipcar, however many years in, more than a decade, was still barely profitable. So it's just really hard to do microtransactions of a vehicle and transportation. Where the business migrated to was longer term rentals of a week and a half while you're on vacation. And what really appeals to people on the lessor side, providing the car, is that with these longer rentals, they over a weekend they can almost pay for the car payment for an entire month. And so it provides economic freedom for a little bit of inconvenience and for sacrificing your car for a weekend. You can basically make your car payment uh, and eliminate that line from your personal P&L. So it makes economic sense. Uh, and it's much like eBay. It spurned micro entrepreneurs that would go and buy used cars, hire a few people, set up shop near an airport, and suddenly you could have micro entrepreneurs that are running 10, 15, 20 car fleets. Uh, on the renter side, it's you can choose anything. When I first visited Bend, Oregon, where I now call home, we rented a Tesla Model 3. It was right after the Model 3 came out. It's delightful. It's certainly more entertaining to drive than what I could have gotten from Hertz or Avis. And the car owner met me at the airport and picked me up at baggage, and then I dropped him off at home on our way into Bend. So it was a far superior experience, a far better car at roughly the same cost. When I travel with my family, we can rent a minivan. And I can throw the kids and all their gear and all that comes with traveling with toddlers in the back of the minivan, and off we go. So it gives you like a better experience and a lower cost, and usually a far superior selection of vehicles. And
How do
so it
you
worked
think
really well.
Turo's done with it so far?
I think they've done a great job, and full credit goes to Andre Haddad. After we sold the company to what was then Relay Rides. I had the highest esteem for Andre as an entrepreneur who knew marketplace businesses in and out from having started one, sold it to eBay, and then run product at eBay. And he has done a phenomenal job with it. And I continue to learn from him as I've watched from afar at what he's done with the business that we helped start. So really proud to have been proud of it, and give full credit to Andre for turning it into what it has become.
All right. So let's turn to Uber Elevate. You literally worked on flying cars. Um, it- how real is it? How imminent is it? Should people expect this to happen in their lifetime? What do you think?
Yep, yep. So worked on flying cars. My colleagues would probably cringe at the term. They much prefer the
I
VTOL
know. Uh,
terminology, especially those schooled at NASA.
right.
Uh,
Much more fun to say flying cars. Yeah.
for those listening, that's vertical takeoff and landing, which means it takes off vertically like a helicopter, but then flies horizontally like a plane. Um, it's amazing technology, and it will be here in our lifetime. And this is something that will resonate with you, Bradley. I think it's as much a technical challenge as it is a regulatory and policy
Yeah,
change.
for sure. For sure.
Like the two of the three biggest issues facing the technology: one, air traffic control, airspace management, and the entire drone industry is facing similar hurdles. And I'm sure you've spent some time on this and realized the complexity involved. It's non-trivial. How do you control airspace when you like there could be more vehicles taking off and landing in a given hour from a heliport for VTOLs than are in the air across America over an entire day. So it's orders of magnitude more complexity for airspace management required for this to exist. The good news is we have computers, and computers are pretty good at math at speed. So it is a solvable problem, but there are a lot of regulatory bodies involved, and you need to get everybody to play nicely.
Yeah, no, I always enjoyed talking to Justin Ehrlich when he was with you guys over at ATG. Just the range of kind of regulatory issues is pretty fascinating. So, what do you think will get solved first, the technical challenges or the regulatory?
Oof. Well, I feel like the technical challenges are solved in theory, and it's a matter of time to go from small scale models to larger scale models to then test flights. And there's some great companies building VTOLs out there. Joby Air is fantastic. They've got an amazing engineering team. Uber was excited to be partnering with them, and I'm filled with optimism for what they're going to be demonstrating to the world. So I think technically it is largely solved. We haven't rolled out the first one yet commercially, but I think the technical challenges are solved. Airspace management is a big one, and then just NIMBYism is a real issue. Like if you look at most urban environments, there aren't a whole lot of helicopter pads. New York probably has more helicopter pads in service than any other metropolitan area in the country. Um, but a city like San Francisco, I think there's only one in the San Francisco proper area, and it's attached to the hospital. So even though there's 6 or 7 hospital pad or helicopter pads, they're not serviceable because of the noise concerns.
Right.
So there's a lot of issues to solve societally, regulatorily, and just getting used to it before it becomes mainstream. Um, but it'll be here, Bradley.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it. And then the final thing I want to touch on that you're doing on top of all of that, you're also an investor. Tell me about the kind of startups you're interested in investing in. Where do you deploy capital? What are you looking for? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I've tended to gravitate towards the area that I know best, which is transportation, mobility, autonomy, robotics, AI. Either because it's my interest or other companies that I've invested in introduced me to their peers in the industry. But my interests are broader, and so for me, it's about meeting entrepreneurs that I'm compelled by that are solving important problems in the world. I recently invested in a company called Replenish that is trying to increase recycling in our country by closing the loop between big brands and then all of the product that's out there. And they, much like I described, technology hasn't been brought into food banks. Well, many of the recycling hubs around the country are operating in almost a DOS environment. So they're
Right.
building the enterprise software layer that can connect the network of thousands of hubs around the country to the big mills that process it, and then close the loop with data back to the brand so that they can increase the amount of recycled content they can get access to, because suddenly there's data, and that's an industry that's been operating largely without data, at least at the local level. So it's an amazing entrepreneur there, Mark Garman, who's been working on recycling issues since he was a middle schooler. And so when I meet entrepreneurs like that, even though I know little to nothing about the recycling industry, I know it's super important. And I jump at the opportunity to work alongside great entrepreneurs that are solving important problems.
Yeah, no, it's the cool stuff to be able to invest in. All right, so last question: how do people who are listening to this get involved in Helping Hands if they want to help out?
Yeah. So a couple things. First, we're we spent the first phase of our journey, like building product and making sure that the solutions work. And Uber was generous enough to contribute 3 full months worth of trips to the cause. So they've been our largest benefactor to date. For this to scale, we need to actually figure out a way to fund the organization and fund the cost of what we're doing, both in terms of the food and the last mile services. So we've just started fundraising in the last week. Whether it's individuals, you can donate on our site. There's a donate button, or we're working through other organizations. We just partnered with Bridgepoint Capital, an organization I have advised on the side, with their COVID hardship fund, who contributed $50,000 to our efforts. So if you're inclined and inspired by the work, check out our website, www.helpinghands.community, and we'd welcome your donations. But more than donating, your time is the most valuable thing you have. So sign up to be a volunteer, plug into your local community, and look for ways of contributing. Or if you're looking to join our core team and want to learn more, then we've got a jobs page link. These are volunteer jobs that you can find at the footer of our website. And that's, again, www.helpinghands.community.
All right, well, strongly encourage everyone listening to go check it out. Amazing organization. And Jeff, so thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for your time, Bradley. It was great to meet you.
Likewise.